So Detroit Future City, we were founded as an independent nonprofit in 2016 after the release of the Detroit Strategic Framework, which was really an effort to engage residents around a 50-year vision for Detroit. And since the release of the strategic framework in 2013, there have been a lot of changes in Detroit. We've seen improvements in terms of our housing market, commercial investments and developments. So to that end, our new strategic focus is on two areas. We look at how can we really grow incomes and to grow our middle class in Detroit, and in particular for our Black Detroiters and people of color. And all at the same time, how can we also create thriving and resilient neighborhoods that will attract and retain residents here in the city? Our community residents, our stakeholders have an immense amount of lived experience and knowledge, and that's incredibly important in both informing and driving our research, but also in terms of making sure that our research is meeting the needs of Detroit and helping to shed light on what are some of the gaps in our knowledge, where do we need to go, and how can we help shape policy. In 2021, the center released the State of Economic Equity in Detroit, which brought together data and research to understand economic equity in Detroit from both a regional perspective as well as from a racial equity perspective. We worked in collaboration with our community stakeholders to develop a shared vision for what economic equity looks like in Detroit. And from that, we wanted to make sure that the research and the data that we found and the 22 indicators that we identified for measuring economic equity could be used over the long term to measure our progress towards that shared vision.
So we really focus on linking vacant land transformation and civic engagement and community planning in three different ways. The first is really network building, so trying to build the collective ecosystem of public, private, and nonprofit partners that are working to advance open space in our city. We also work to develop tools and resources to support that work happening both on the ground, but also to support and advocate for policy change. It's super important to be thinking holistically about neighborhoods, so not just the vacant land and the open space, but also the housing, the mobility, how people get around.
So we really think about adaptive reuse of industrial properties as serving multiple functions. There's the economic consideration and there's also the environmental consideration. And we've done some research and also some place-based projects to really think about all of those things and how they come together under one planning consideration. So that really is thinking about how to reduce environmental mitigations with site design, and also thinking about things like local job creation and other socially conscious considerations that are kind of built into the engagement and planning efforts. Detroit Future City is really committed to neighborhood stabilization, and one of the key pillars for that is housing. Single-family housing is the primary form of housing in Detroit, and so we convened something called the Detroit Neighborhood Housing Compact, which brings together practitioners from the policy and advocacy space, researchers, lenders, real estate, and a whole host of other professions to really focus on the goals of increasing home ownership, increasing the quality of the housing, and also decreasing cost burden for owners and renters. And the significance of that is really looking at how that supports the household, but also how it supports the neighborhood and neighborhood stabilization.